The author of that story got things more or less right. I call it volunteering because that's essentially what it was. My monthly pay as a crisis line psychologist wouldn't cover 2 trips to a cafe. I had, and still have, a real income elsewhere, so the reason I sat at that phone from the early 2000s onward was simply a desire to do some good in the world. 7 years I put in, after which I ran away in disgrace and have had nothing to do with crisis lines since, nor do I want to. More than that, I developed a deep aversion to phone conversations in general. The work grinds you down. I've known people who, after too long with the dark side of life broadcasting itself through their earpiece in a dozen different voices, slowly sank toward something close to misanthropy. But that's not why I left. After I was transferred to the children's line, I simply broke. Below, I'll briefly describe a few of the calls. No particular order, just the sequence in which they come back to me. They came in at all hours. They represent a tiny fraction of all the calls I took. But these happened, and they'll keep happening. It was a quiet night shift. I'd spent most of it reading another training manual my supervisor had handed out. An incoming call. I put on my headset and introduced myself. A middle-aged woman, nervous, close to hysteria. She said the neighbors were acting strangely. She was home alone and frightened. At around 3 in the morning, her doorbell woke her up. She looked through the peephole and saw nothing. Not just the hallway light out, but no light at all through the little lens. Just darkness, as if someone had pressed a thumb over it. On the other side of the door was her neighbor, asking to borrow some sugar. What kind of sugar at 3 in the morning? Regular sugar, granulated, for stewed fruit. Open the door. The caller thought it over and, quite reasonably, refused. Come back tomorrow. But the neighbor wouldn't let it go. She kept at it, making noise for a good 10 minutes. The client put the chain on and threatened to call the police. Things went quiet for a while. Then someone started hammering on the door with both fists. Fearful, a man's voice, shouting, "You're flooding us! Open up right now!" Fearful, the client called the police, where a half-asleep duty officer told her all units were out on calls, but he'd reach someone on the radio, and they'd come. Just wait. By that point, the downstairs neighbor had given up trying to get in. Less than 5 minutes later, the doorbell rang again. An official voice identified itself as a police officer, said they'd received a call. 5 minutes. Everyone out on a call. To the officer, who kept ringing and warning of consequences. If he was denied entry, the voices of neighbors soon added themselves. They didn't answer her questions. They laid siege to the door. The client locked herself in her room, found the number for a crisis center her late husband had left behind, and called because she had nowhere else to turn. I asked her to carry the phone out to the hallway. I suspected she might be experiencing a delirious episode, though she seemed fully oriented, just very frightened. Fearful. What I heard through the phone was a battering against the iron door and a chorus of voices, all shouting different things at once, overlapping until they became nearly impossible to distinguish. While I sat there in something like shock, listening, it seemed to me that new voices kept joining in, men and women both, as if the entire space beyond that door was packed with an angry crowd. The caller began to cry and recite the Lord's Prayer. Nervous, I tried to shout over the noise and ask for her address, again and again, but she only went on crying and praying while the voices on the other side told their stories. Sugar, a flood, utilities, a parcel, the police. At some point, I still don't quite believe it. Fearful, I picked out my own voice in the noise, shouting something about the psychological support service, insisting on an in-person consultation. Something on the other side of that threshold, in my voice, was promising to help, promising to get everything sorted out. Whisper. I managed to shout into the headset that she must not open the door under any circumstances. The noise in my earpiece surged. The line went dead.